All right, howdy everybody. In this video, what we're going to do is go over some basics of comic book grading, and I've selected a nice array here of kind of both Silver Age books as well as some books from the early 80s and late 70s to kind of evaluate and just kind of point out some of the things that I see when I look at a book. So let me just slide most of these off to the side here real quick. And let's just start with this Amazing Spider-Man 3, which of course is an epic key issue from the early Silver Age, first appearance of Dr. Octopus. And this comic was featured in the other video, and it's the same one. So it has the same staples. And in that video, I highlighted the staining that's on the front cover. But before we get through all of that, and just give you a rundown of kind of what I do when I look at a comic book for the first time. Basically, just give it a good once-over. See if it looks like a nice sharp copy. So for instance, these are of similar era. They're both 12-cent Marvels. And you can just tell at first glance that the X-Men book is a much, much nicer book than the Spider-Man. And even though the first impression shouldn't set the grade, it gives you a good idea of what you're looking for. And the reason I say that is because it's really only the major defects that are going to set the grade, not the small defects. To put it differently, if you have a 7.0 book with 2 spine ticks and a crease, and you have that exact same book without the spine ticks, but still with the crease, it's still going to be a 7.0 with or without those fine spine ticks. And it's really only those biggest defects that hit the bottom, or that hit the grade. So in this one, if we're looking at it, we can see we have a pretty nice sharp copy here and a very low grade copy over here. And so that visualization just tells me I don't have to worry about every little nick and chip on this book because it's already going to come in pretty low grade. And I can see a big chunk of surface wear right here. I can see some evidence of staining there and here, and you can see really a bunch of damage across the bottom as well as creasing along here. The spine looks quite tattered, and you can see that some of these ticks aren't really ticks, they're actually tears into the book. So if we flip it over, we have more evidence of staining. Again, we can very clearly tell that the spine is quite heavily worn. The good news though is there's no major pieces missing out of the cover, and so let's just open it on up. One thing I always encourage you to do is to actually count the pages. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. 15 is a bad number of pages to have. You're supposed to have 16 because there's 32 pages and that's 8 full sheets of paper, and when you fold those over you end up with 16. So let's count again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and that's the back cover. So as I said, these are supposed to have 16 pages, and so if we go looking here, we can see right there, there is a page cut out of this book. Now, a full page missing like that immediately makes this an incomplete copy, and it can be assigned a 0.5 grade for being incomplete. It's really important for people when dealing with an incomplete book to know if the story is all there. And so here we can see that the pages are numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, there's our missing page, so we better hope we come up with 20. Number 20, this would be 21. So there are 21 story pages, all of which are there. In this Amazing Spider-Man 3, this must have been one heck of an ad page because it is removed from a surprising number of these early Amazing Spider-Man. So you want to count the pages. And even with that, then we really don't need to go any further to assign all of the defects. If it's missing a page, it's automatically a 0.5 incomplete copy. Now, you might say, well, what if we want to get it a qualified grade? So if you don't know, CGC for comics that have one major defect will sometimes give it a green label instead of a blue label up top. That is a qualified grade. And that green label is really a buyer beware that the number in the corner is inaccurate for some reason. And so if this were a much sharper copy that was missing that same page, we might say, well, if it presents like a 7 or an 8.0, we might want that 7 or 8.0 number in the top corner, and we might then accept a qualified green label saying incomplete page missing. But in this case, given that it's quite stained, it has extensive interior staining, and it has a variety of other creasing and problems, this would not grade high as a qualified grade, and so there's really no point in thinking about a qualified grade on this copy. It's simply a 0.5 incomplete copy. Now we can jump here to our next Amazing Spider-Man in the series. This one, again, if we compare it to this X-Men comic, it is quite tattered, and you can see that right off the bat. Again, a super nice sharp copy, a very tattered first appearance of the Shocker. And so if we just spend some time here glancing at it, we can see that this one, again, has no major pieces out. It does have these staple holes, and so those are likely from some other damage. And if you look on the front cover there, you can see, again, staple holes. And so this one at some point had been stapled all the way through, maybe to combine it with another copy, or maybe somebody was worried about the cover falling off. These do look like the original manufacturing staples. They're in about the right spot for a Silver Age Marvel book. And so somebody must have connected it in two different places. So that would be staple holes, and you can see they're going to penetrate the entire book. So let's just do our quick page counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and good news, we have a 16th page. And so this one is complete. You can then on your way back kind of flip through and just make sure there aren't any coupon cuts out. I know a lot of people sometimes skip this step, but it's better for you to find out ahead before you mail it off than to have CGC flag it. And so that all looks good. All right, so now we're down to a grade. The interior looks complete. We have heavy surface damage up here, down here, all the way across. And it's pretty clear if you're holding this book that it has kind of atrocious gloss. You can see some of the original gloss is okay right in here, but everywhere else the surface is wrecked. So what that means is that at some point this book was essentially completely covered in water. Good news is the inner wraps look pretty good, but the cover definitely has heavy moisture damage. It was probably stuck to another copy, and when somebody separated it, they ripped it all off. No major pieces missing though, so that's good. No signs of restoration or other shenanigans, and so to me this looks like a 2.0 copy. That is a good copy. If it were missing any large pieces, or if it had any significant structural damage, like the spine looks good, the staples, while rusted, there's no signs of rust migration on the interior. So this to me looks like a 2, maybe if you wanted to be generous, a 2.5 copy. Low grade, but complete and good. So let's move on to the other superhero. This would be Batman number 235. This is the epic first Silver Age appearance of Two-Face, and more importantly to me, it is a Denny O'Neil story with Neil Adams art, and so it is a very nice one. You can see that this one now right off the bat looks a little bit sharper and a lot nicer than this copy. That might not be too surprising since this is a 1971 book and this is a 1966 book, and so there's about 5 years of difference in age here. But we're not going to account for that age difference in the grade in any way. We're just going to look through, again, what the book looks like. This one, I'm not going to check for interior pages on camera. I've already done that. You can see if I flip it over, again, it's got some rippling here, and so that indicates moisture damage. You can see that there's some very light staining around. There's some external debris. Somebody has penned their name on it, and if you look in the reflection and the glare, you can see that there was another name, a $4.50 price tag, and then presumably somebody else sold it for $40 later, because there's a 40 here imprinted with a big scratch through it. So this book has definitely been through more than a few pairs of hands, which is kind of fun just from a history standpoint to think through everything that, you know, all the people who might have held or read this book. If you open it all the way up though, what you will notice is while the top staple is secured all the way through, the bottom staple is separated on several wraps. And I'm not going to tug on it too much, but you can see it's separated there. And that one looks like it might be the first one to hold on. And so important to account for that, and note that the centerfold is detached at bottom staples, so that should go in the grader notes. Other than that, as we look down the cover here, there is a small color breaking crease right here. We can see that there is a larger crease going this way, as well as damage along the whole edge. And then the corner here doesn't have one crease, it has about 3 creases kind of radiating out from that edge, so that edge at some point was crumpled. More importantly though, there is a large color breaking crease right along here that goes the whole cover, and so that would very limit the grade. This crease on its own would drop the condition to about a 5.5. As we go down the spine, we can see that there's a good amount of wear to that bottom staple. That's not surprising if the centerfold is detached, and you can see these tears radiating in from the corner. The bottom corner is blunted down here, and it has definitely lost some paper off the edge. There is a spine split / tear starting up top there, and again some more paper missing off the top, as well as a good amount of cover wrinkling and just general wear and tear. And so this to me looks like I would put it at a good, very good grade copy. I would consider it maybe a 3.0. If you wanted to be very generous, maybe a 3.5. Again, there's just too much creasing in all these spots, as well as an accumulation of defects, evidence of water damage, some moderate staining. I believe we can probably find some of that on the interior. You definitely can see the rippling there. And no, it looks okay-ish there. Oh, there's a good amount of foxing down the center of the spine, and so you can see it that way. Let's see if there's more foxing on the front cover. Yeah, there's at least minimal foxing as well on the front cover. So, but nevertheless, Half and Evil is Denny O'Neil, Neil Adams. I'm all on board with it. So I would give this one a 3, maybe a 3.5. Moving on up to the X-Men here that I've flashed a few times. This is a much nicer copy than any of the other books I have. I've already counted the pages on this, so we're good on that front. I just want to show you the back cover here. There are a couple of things that you want to be quite subtle that might not pop out at you immediately on camera, but they're there, especially if you're looking under the gloss. So first off, there's some goobies here on the side, so we can see those goobies. This corner does have a crease through it. It's quite a fine crease, but it is in fact a crease from about there to there, and so that crease through will limit the grade quite a bit. And probably what's more important is right here there is a very weak tide line, and so this entire area is going to be a stain. And at least when I look at a stain, I think about total surface area that would be counted as stain, as well as how deep it is. Now this one is quite mild. You might not even be able to see it, but it starts right about here, and it runs this whole area and comes down. So with stains, sometimes you're better off looking on the interior cover. And so let's flip this open. And there you go. So you definitely can see it as a change in the color from right about here up to that point. And so you can see that the rest of the interior cover has a little bit of tanning up top. It's a little bit cleaner down bottom. So if we compare the top edge here to the bottom, there is a difference in aging. But definitely if we look at this corner, we can see that it is significantly lighter than the rest of it. And that means after this book had tanned, it had gotten wet and all the tanning had washed out, at least from that segment. In principle, one could probably clean that off and even it out. And this particular issue, I don't think I would recommend it. So I would consider that stain to be the single biggest defect. But if we did remove that stain, you know, we would still have a significant number of spine damage. We'd have lower edge damage on this side, There is some light creasing along this side as well, particularly right there you can see the color break. And so all of these, let's just take a quick peek at the front interior cover. Yep, and so you can again see that the top is darker than the bottom. And so again, there's light tanning on the top and it looks pretty good on the bottom. And so this is all pretty epic there, written by Smilin' Stan Lee with layouts by Jolly Jack Kirby himself. So really awesome comic book to have really in any condition. But I think the stain here is going to limit it. I would put this book at a 6.0 with that stain. Now you might ask, if I'm saying that stain puts it at a 6, why wouldn't I recommend removing the stain? Well, if that stain weren't there, you're still going to have a crease here. You're still going to have creasing along the bottom here and along this edge. And so I don't think this book will grade too much higher even without that stain. But I guess we won't find out. I would put it at maybe a 6.5 without the stain on a really generous day of 7. But I think with that stain, it'll be a 6.0 when it comes back from CGC. All right, moving on up here, we're going to jump forward into the future. Well, actually a long time ago, I suppose, in a galaxy far, far away. This is from the, probably the most popular movie of the original Star Wars, The Empire Strikes Back. And so this is issue 2 from the Empire Strikes Back trilogy, where we have the epic showdown of Luke Skywalker on the frozen planet Hoth. So very cool issue. This one is noted as being the first appearance of Rogue Squadron, which rumor has it is going to be featured in some upcoming Disney merchandise or movie or TV show. Right off the bat, though, obviously it's much sharper than any of the other books that we've looked at so far, and that should not be surprising because it's from the 80s, not from the 60s. If you flip it over, you'll notice this big band of black going down here. This is miscut, so that was actually supposed to be cut off, and you can tell because this white border here shouldn't be here, right? So the black line separating that orange and the white should be really close to the edge, and you can tell it's wider up top than it is at the bottom. Now all of that counts as manufacturing, and you can also tell that there's no open space over here, so that Comic Code Authority goes right to the edge, and the registered on the Toys R Us is cut off, and there should be the rest of the box down here. So all of that counts as manufacturing. It won't count against your grade. Miscuts and miswraps like this are embarrassingly common for books through the 80s and first half of the 90s. These comics were really printed as fast as possible, as cheaply as possible, to keep the price on them down as low as possible. And so that's just kind of what you get. So we're not going to count that against the grade. What we are going to do, though, is take a quick glance around the perimeter. And what you can see is there are no major creases, so that's really good. The spine actually looks pretty clean. So that little gobby there and this little doobie there should clean up. You'll notice that there's some discoloration here in the middle, so that should also clean up. If we flip it over, again, we're not going to count this. There's some stuff in the white area here, so that would clean up as part of a clean and press, as well as along the bottom. And again, no major creases. There might be a little bit of color breaking up there on the top corner, but that will be well below a 1/4 inch. And so you can get a quite high grade book with that. The biggest damage on this book is actually going to be the staples. And so if you look carefully at them, both staples are rusted. This one is tarnished and rusted. And so when I see staples like that, the first thing I want to do is open this up and look at the paper on the inside. And the best spot to do that is to go to the centerfold, although you can see the pages are beautifully white, which is great. These are incredibly bright pages for how old this book is. Let's see if we can get there. All right, so here we are at the centerfold. And if I flatten that out, you can see that this staple looks white, so that is tarnished. The top staple here is rusted, and significantly you can see that the rust has migrated to the page, and so that will significantly lower the grade. A rusted staple without rust migration, I have seen up to a 9.0 on, but I believe with that rust migration, it's going to drop it probably to a 7.5. And so while this copy, and here you go, you can see it on this page. This half the book, by the way, is not as white as the first half of the book, which is quite entertaining. You can see that it's significantly tanner on the back half than the front half, so it must have been stored somewhere inappropriate. But you can see that that is clearly migration of the rust onto the pages. In principle, staples can be replaced or cleaned, but once that rust has started to migrate to the paper, it's irreversible as far as I know, and that's gonna eventually damage that paper to a point where it's brittle. So if you've ever opened or worked with comics that have significant rust migration, those staples connections, that little fiber between where the staple holes are, that's going to separate quite easily if it's not already separated before you get there. And so that makes it almost impossible to work with books with bad migration unless you're willing to really risk the staple connection. So this is my warning to you about staple rust, because otherwise this book looks really, really sharp. But the staples, along with that interior migration, are really going to limit the grade on this book. All right, now these are two of our favorite books, very popular. So this is the first appearance of Kitty Pryde. And I selected this book for two reasons. One of which is that there is a printer's crease along here. The printer crease is always a left to right crease. Usually it's either about here or down there. And occasionally they'll be paired with one on the back. And so this copy seems to be free of that on the back. These printer creases are shockingly common, especially from these late 70s Marvel books. So She-Hulk 1, you're going to see a lot of that. These early Chris Claremont X-Men books, very common. I think half-ish of the Uncanny X-Men 101s that I get the first appearance of the Phoenix have that printer crease. Thankfully, this does not count against your grade, so you can ignore that. The difference between a printer crease and a regular crease, though, is if I look straight down at this, I do not see white in there. So this crease is always left to right to be a printer's crease. It's always close to the open edge, and it's never color breaking. And so there's a big distinction between that and a normal crease. Now, with that settled, let's look at the rest of the book here, and we can see that there's a little bit of a corner issue on the bottom. That piece is still attached, but not by much. And so while I'm working on this book, I'm going to do my darndest to make sure that that piece does not fall off. This book has not yet been cleaned and pressed. You know, the spine looks very clean. There's one little tick up here. And I'm not shy to run my finger down a spine. You definitely can feel the ticks. The other trick I have sometimes is to use a black light to see if you can get a tick to pop out at you with the black light. I'll have a video on that later with some more discrete examples. But other than that, this is a super sharp copy. If we flip it over, you know, first glance, we don't see anything. As I look down here, I can see some bends. These should press out. Let's see if I can get them in the glare there. But the bends are right here next to the Lego and then right down by the bottom of the corner. That all looks pretty good. The reason I wanted to bring this one out is because right there, right next to that you've got to build them, the Y, there is indeed a small stain. It is a very small stain, and it's really hard to see, but right there, it's real. And there's another little bit of it right up top. Let me bring that up to the camera so you can see it. It's pretty subtle. But that on an issue that's otherwise as beautiful as this one, you know, will actually significantly lower the grade. And so that one, both because it's so light and because this issue is otherwise so beautiful, I'm going to do my best to pull that stain off. With the stain, you know, this copy might be an 8.5. I think if I can remove that stain, this will get overlooked as a manufacturing defect, partially because the covers stick out further than the inner wraps, and you can see that all the inner wraps have that same chunk cut out of them. And so that was not a, you know, somebody just being negligent. That was a manufacturing thing when that corner got cut. So that little bit has been stuck there for decades, just barely holding on for its life. So hopefully that'll get overlooked by CGC. The printer's crease will get overlooked by CGC. And so I think our biggest defect then is that spine tick. And maybe if I can't press it out, a little bit of a crease down here. But that stain lowering to an 8 or an 8.5 is truly destroying this copy's grade. I'm hoping to be able to push it up to a 9.4 or a 9.6, which would be pretty epic. Now this one is a great copy. Who doesn't love this? Very classic story, very classic cover, with tons of homage covers that have been borrowed from this one. So when I look at it, again, at first glance, it looks like a very high-grade copy. I don't see any major creases on the corner. There is something up here, and if I look at it, that is going to be a crease right through the comic code. And we should be able to see that on the inside. It does not go all the way through the corner, so it's just damage about halfway, so that's maybe a 1/4 inch. So a very small crease there. We have some edge wear, and on the back here, let's see here, we do not see a whole lot of damage. There's a spine tick right there, and a little bit of a crunch down here at the corner. Now this particular copy is going to need a really intense ironing, because on the back here you can see all of this rippling. And the reason I selected this copy to share with you is if I flip it on its edge, you can see that that rippling goes all the way through the book. And so this was smushed all the way. Now, a regular press is not going to be able to get all that out in one press. And so what I'm going to have to do is actually iron all of the pages flat, and then with a backer board under them, I'll iron them all individually to get that memory of that crease out, and then hopefully when I do a press, it'll flatten out. And you can see it's true on the bottom. It's a little bit less, but also true across the top. And so as it stands right now, this might be a 7.5, 7.0 book with that full crunch down there. That's really going to have a significant negative impact. But the owner's lucky because that did not break color, and that will be able to be ironed and then pressed out. And so we'll see how that looks when we're all done with it. I'm hoping the owner will be able to get this one up to a 9.2-ish. With that tear being, or that little crease up there being the limiting grade factor. So we'll see how that one comes out. All right, so that's it for some quick grading videos there. You know, we can talk about the kind of really more modern books. We can talk about some Silver Age books and some gems here, some key first appearances. And we can really go all the way from 0.5 up to some very clearly pressable defects and fixable defects that'll hopefully land us in some very high-grade copies, with cautionary tales to count your pages, especially on Silver Age books. I don't usually do it on moderns, but I'll always do it on Silver Age books. You know, just check the whole gambit there. And so thank you for your attention. If you found the content in this video useful, please do like, subscribe, leave a comment, etc.